I guess the best thing that I can do this morning is start off with something personal and then build on that. So for some of you here who may have heard these first two stories, still look interested, because they really kind of capture the essence, the heart of what I'm trying to get across. So it kind of goes like this. Like many of us in my generation, we were in the hippie drug counterculture, the best of days and the worst of days. And I'll never forget a time when I found myself in Christchurch. Anybody been there? Christchurch, yes. Found myself in Christchurch and to all intents and purposes just living wherever I could crash. Sometimes outside, sometimes inside. And pre-earthquake, I mean, I guess you've all heard of the earthquake that devastated that city, but pre-earthquake, this was years ago, decades, at lunchtime there would be a gathering crowd in the heart of the city, in the public square. And I found myself being numbered amongst them, just being one of many. And there I was, barefooted, clothes that were filthy as, long, matted hair, the natural dreadlock, not the manufactured ones today. And I had a dog called Poet, and so forth and so on. And I just used to turn up at lunchtime because, in a sense, it was entertainment hour. Because there was, in those days, this big black hooded cloaked creature that used to get up and speak, and his name was the Wizard. And he, honestly, pre-Harry Potter, you know, pointed hat, the whole deal, and he would try and hold the crowd spellbound with his incantations on life. And then at that time, a short white fella with a big black Bible would get up and speak as well. And then they would turn on each other and argue. And, you know, I thought, and I don't know, much has changed. This has got to be the only entertainment in Christchurch. So I turned up every lunchtime to watch this shootout, you know. And I became noticed. I mean, no one wanted to have anything to do with me. I looked a mess. I was a mess. I was like a dead dog. I don't know the last time you bumped into a dead dog, but they have a glazed look in their eyes, they smell, and you stay away from them. And I was like that. I was a dead dog. And but I got noticed by a friend of the short fellow with a big black Bible, and he came up and started to engage me in conversation. And I just stared back at him, gave him the dead dog look. And he wandered off, didn't know what to do with me. And then, but he week after week, he was quite persistent. And slowly I kind of warmed up. I came to life a little bit. And then it got to the point where he said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Anywhere." And he didn't quite know how to interpret that, got lost in translation. So he wandered off, and then a couple of weeks later he came back and said, "Where do you live?" And again, we had one of these strange conversations. And then eventually it did sink in for him that I lived anywhere. I had no fixed abode. And so a few weeks later he said, "Come with me." And so I went with him, and we went for a 10-minute drive to a place called Upper Colombo Street, and he pulled the car to the side of the curb and he said, "Come with me." And I got out of the car and went with him, and he walked down an alleyway. And how many have heard this story, actually? I mean, there's a few. And he said, "Come with me," and I went with him. And he walked into this house and he said, "Come with me," and I went with him. Because you did anything in those days. We've missed out on so much today. So I went with him, and he walked down this corridor and he said, "Come with me," and he walked through the kitchen and said, "Come with me," and then he walked into his bedroom and he said, "Come with me," and I was a bit worried at that point. But he seemed a nice guy, so I walked in and he closed the door, and I thought, what happens next? And he went straight for his wardrobe. And there were jackets and coats in the wardrobe, and of course I'm thinking Narnia, And then it's still the LSD kicking in. And then he had a suitcase at the top of the wardrobe, and he stacked it full of a few clothes, went to his door, the bedroom door, and said, "See ya." And I said, "What?" And he said, "See ya." And I said, "What?" And he said, "You can have the room." And he left, and he gave me his bedroom. And I guess for me, that's who I am. That goes to the very core of who I am. That I was a stranger to him. It's interesting when you read, my PhD actually is in the area of the stranger. And when you do the literature review on the stranger, you know, often the stranger is interpreted as someone who's stigmatized, marginalized, poor, vulnerable, out there on the margins. I prefer Christine Pohl's working definition of the stranger. Anyone read Pohl? Making Room is her book. Christine Pohl says that the stranger is a person who is unknown to us. So they could be professional or poor. They could be rich or under-resourced. They could be in Toorak, is that right? Toorak? Yeah. Or they could be in Footscray. The stranger is the one who is unknown to us. And I was unknown to this person. For this person who gave me his room, his name is Graham. And that was one of his existing worlds. Every day he turned up to the square. That was one of his existing worlds. And in his existing world, one of his existing worlds, there was someone that he didn't know. Me. And so he walked towards the stranger in his midst. Are you with me? And next to the coffee table on his bed was a Bible. It was the second time in my life I'd bumped into the Bible. I mean, I don't come from a Christian home. I'm still the only Christian in my family. So I have a twin sister, I have a brother, another brother who died in a motorbike accident, and my parents were both remarried and divorced a number of times and so on. So, but it was the second time I bumped into the Bible. And you know, who's not to want to read the Bible after an incredible demonstration of love? So I picked up this book, began to read it, and to use the language of Paul that he mentioned before, saw Messiah. It's great, eh? Saw Messiah King, who in the heart of faithfulness returned to his people. But Messiah, by definition, is also Lord of the earth and all peoples. And I saw that as a non-Christian. I'm still waiting for a lot of Christians to see it. And so I bowed the knee and bent the heart and so on, and gave a solemn pledge, sacred vow of allegiance to King Jesus, that every decision would be shaped around his kingship. So then I thought, I've got to go to church. So there was another person living in this house, and his name was Bruce, as I came to know. And I said to Bruce, "Oh, do you go?" So I eventually became a Christ follower, a follower of the King. And I said to Bruce, "Do you go to a church?" He said, "Yes." So I said, "Oh, can I come along?" He said, "Yeah." So I went to this church, and churches are scary places. For those of us who are not used to them, they are, you know this. So I made it a practice of seating myself in the back row, thinking that whenever the service came to an end, I'd be the first one out. And what I didn't know in this particular church was that the pastor who, you know, once he had done what he was doing up front, before the service was over, he'd make a beeline for the door to get there before anybody else got out. And so he was walking down the aisle on this particular Sunday night, and he spotted me. and he got control of the speed limit in his own life, slowed down, and came and sat down next to me. And I was still barefooted, matted here, dazed and glazed, but, you know, a profound shift had occurred in my heart, but that was still not coming out, as it were, you know. And he tried to engage me in conversation, couldn't do it, gave up. The following Sunday, he saw me again, slowed right down, came. This was a repeating pattern. And he just kept parking his skin bag next to mine and tried to engage me in conversation. And slowly again I warmed up to this fellow. And then at one point he said to me, Mick, how would it be if every door in my life is now open to you? And I said, what the heck do you mean? You know, and these Christians in their doors. And he said, oh, my kitchen door, you can come round for a meal any time you like. He said, my study door, pop in at the office. And he said, my bedroom door. And I thought, there we go again. And he said, you know, and he would tell you today that I can't remember. I mean, if you've been a druggie and a user and a dealer, you can't remember that much. But he would say that actually I availed myself of those doors a lot. I wouldn't be who I am today, the beautiful person that I am. And I look at myself in the mirror today and go, not bad. Because it's amazing what the hands of Jesus can do with a human life.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yes.
And I think Jesus has done a nice piece of work on me. I really do, actually. I'm profoundly grateful. And but in one sense, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that pastor. You might have heard of him, Murray Robertson. Anybody sort of really emerged as a lead pastor of a lead church in New Zealand. We're just a small little dot of a country at the end of the earth. But he, anyway. So here he too saw a stranger in his midst and walked towards the stranger in his midst. That's why I like what you said, Sarah, because I am really of the view, you see this, well, I'll come back to that, if you don't mind. But I like what you said. So when I became a follower of Jesus, these two kind of encounters kept ricocheting around within me. And I don't know, when you've been impacted that way, you catch something. And I caught something like, I want to be there for the stranger in my midst. And I want to mobilize other people to be there for the stranger in their midst. So that kind of became a self-identity statement. That became an inner imperative. That became something that I would shape all my decisions around. That became something that I wanted to be consistent with. I mean, it's good to have an inner imperative. I think Jesus had one. You know, the Spirit of the Lord is now upon me too. And if you read the rest of the book of Luke, he lived consistent with his self-identity statement. I think one of the reasons, you know, why we have so many Christians today who live inconsistently is because they haven't nurtured a self-identity statement. You know, I mean, I think it's good to have a white t-shirt on and emblazoned on that white t-shirt a one-liner. And we can each have different ones. But it's sort of like these are the inner imperatives that shape the lives that we are to live. Without that, we get hijacked by all the other voices. Even in Christian ministry. Am I right or am I right? So I guess the thing that got emblazoned on my white t-shirt was a heartbeat for the 100th person. You can't beat that one. In other words, Jesus said, leave the 99 and go to the one, the 100th person. So a heartbeat for the 100th person. That became my inner imperative. Have you got one? Tell the person next to you. Got you there. But tell the person next to you, what is, even if you've only got a word or two, but what do you think your inner imperative is? I mean, most of us at this age and stage, shh, go to it, okay? Can someone give me yours? You can't better mine, but that's your problem. No, but have you got one? Do you find us Kiwis are quite sarcastic?
No.
Because we're not.
Oh, really?
Oh, I think we're harsher than you guys.
Really?
Yeah.
We don't get it.
Oh, you don't get our sarcasm?
Nuance, maybe.
Oh, okay. There is no nuance. We are an unsophisticated, rough and ready lot.
That's why I moved here.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, and we're also keep putting ourselves down. People, tell me about the beginnings of yours. What's the kind of tune that makes you dance?
Cheryl talked about.
You can't tell me.
Oh, sorry, aren't we supposed to reflect what we heard?
What's yours, Paul?
No, I want people to speak for themselves.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were asking us what we had heard.
No, what is?
I'm just being pushing back to you.
Shut up now. Right. Okay, so what is your? Well, tell me. Just give me one or two. Please, someone talk. Come on.
Communicating God and His ways well.
Communicating God and His ways as well.
And His ways, comma, well.
Okay, and His ways, comma, well. Very good. Anyone else?
From Colossians, around about Colossians chapter 2,
Yeah.
just that they'd understand the fullness of Christ.
Yeah. Okay. Understand the fullness of Christ. Anyone else?
I don't have a Bible
Yeah.
package.
Yeah.
But it'd be around the idea of creating space in order for people to discover life.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I like that. Okay.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's
No.
yours?
It really does pay to develop, because you'll find that you, with an inner imperative, your own personal unique charism, you live more consistently actually. So it's just a little thing to keep in mind. So mine was this sort of heartbeat for the 100th person, and with that was wanting to mobilise others to walk towards that socially isolated person. That's the 100th person. If you ask me for a working definition of evil, it is when people either of their own accord or when they're enforced by others to be socially isolated. I think that is evil. So I then thought, so how do we mobilise people to walk towards the stranger in their midst? And so then I thought, well, initially I thought, and this was decades ago, I thought, well, maybe it's through teaching. You know, maybe if you teach people, they'll do it. And, you know, they'll come to see. And on a good day, maybe I got 5%. But the other 95% return to their TVs. So then after a while I thought, well, that's not going to do it. You know, what people believe to be true and what they think is not necessarily determinative of human behaviour. Is that right? So then I thought, well, maybe if I became an exemplar, you know, a hero of the kingdom. So I thought, oh, I'll go to, you know, one of the worst places that, you know, arguably that one can go to. And so in 1985, Ruby and I, my wife, with our two little kiddies at that time, a 9-month and a 2-year-old, we went to a beautiful country, yes, but we went to live in awful places in a beautiful country. And we went to live in a squatter community, in a slum. And we lived in a plywood shack with mud floor. And we did years in that kind of environment, and got grossly sick, were often in danger. We lost one of our little ones, encountered huge disappointments. I could go through the list. So we went to this squatter community. One, yes, incarnational mode of development, living with those that you want to love. But also there was a hope within me, because I am a natural mobiliser. It's, I think, a calling on my life, that maybe if I became this exemplar, that people could see that, this was doable, reachable, accessible, and come on, that kind of spirit. So I think we might have got 7% through being an exemplar, but 93% went back to their TVs. So at that point I thought, what the heck is going to do it? So then we came back to the so-called West, and we came to Australia, came to New Zealand, and I ended up pastoring churches, and I thought that maybe, again, if I embodied it, if I embodied it here, then again they would catch something. They wouldn't necessarily be taught it, they would catch it, that cliche. But again, on a good year, only 5%. And then I thought, well, this is not working, so then I thought, well, maybe if I became a prophet, self-appointed prophet. So I became this kind of globe-trotting person who spoke here, there, and everywhere to tens of thousands of people all over the world. And maybe if I stood in front of groups and rebuked and admonished and talked about the imperative, became a flamethrower, got in people's faces, eye-to-eye challenge, talked about that there is a judgment for Christians based on Matthew 25. And there is. Maybe 10%, 90% still watch their TVs. And I thought, what is going to do it? Then I came to a bit of a realisation that maybe the church is really socially retarded. No disrespect intended. But I just began to wonder actually whether, how pastors and teachers today, they have this way about them that they keep saying, we've got to take that hill. There's that mountain over there, we've got to take it. And they get in front of their people and they in my opinion, and I'm not trying to be harsh here or unfair or unkind, most people in our churches, they just haven't got the wherewithal anymore to go even near the hill, the stranger. And so therefore, when they hear people like me talking about walking towards the stranger in the midst, they suffer from the guilt powerlessness trap. In other words, they're made to feel guilty. Yeah, we sort of know that we're meant to be there for the stranger in our midst, but they feel absolutely powerless. They have no idea on how to do it. I mean, am I right? And so when they hear people like me talking about this stuff, they just walk out absolutely, as I say, suffering from the guilt powerlessness trap. Feeling guilty, but not knowing what to do about it. And they just feel bad, worse. And that's why they don't want to go to surrender. Because actually they feel as though that's what they'll get. What we're trying to do in doing this mini tour right now is to say no. That what surrender is all about is wisdom. See, discernment is knowing what an issue is. Wisdom is knowing how to work with the issue. And so what we're trying to do, and we've been doing it for years actually, at Surrender, is like giving people wisdom. And people don't need more information actually. They need wisdom. So that's the rationale, for Surrender. And so I saw these well-meaning people in our churches. I mean, let's be honest here. Our churches are full of well-meaning people. I think our churches have a truckload of compassion. I went to the slums of Manila to learn how to love the poor. When I left Manila, I got called by a wonderful master who I grate with at times. And he called me to this middle-class church in an upper middle-class suburb of Auckland. And I said to him, what the? And I felt he was saying to me, well, Mick, you've learned how to love the poor. Now I want you to learn how to love the people that you're reacting against. Do you know, it's fascinating, Just as a wee observation, a little observation. Whenever I travel around and I talk about going to the slums and learning how to love the poor, people go, oh, sexy. That's a great topic. When I talk about learning how to love genuinely the middle class, they daze and glaze. They don't want to hear that story. Isn't that interesting? Whereas I believe, actually, that in our churches, in our so-called middle-class churches, there are good people. Truckloads of compassion, but they haven't yet learned the dance of compassion. And like any dance, there are steps. And there are missteps. Yes? And we need to be giving people this wisdom. That's how to dance the dance of compassion, you see. So that's when I began to think up this concept of the alongside-er. What have I said thus far that has kind of gone, tell the person next to you, and then I'll continue again. Go to it. Here we go. So the alongside of, see, I came up with this concept because there are outsiders, insiders, and alongsiders. Now, I mean, I've been an outsider, but you see, you don't have to be an outsider to get alongside an outsider. You don't have to have done drugs to get alongside a druggie. I mean, my eldest daughter, she's 31 or something, she's been in the gangs, she's been on meths and all that. She had to flee New Zealand and come over to Australia. You get all our lot. And 2.5 years ago, she became a Christ follower over here. Isn't that great? But, she's now working with the really damaged women, that no one else can work with, in a way. But in a way, I want to say, you don't have to have gone through something, Greg, in order to be there for that person. So that's being the insider. You don't have to be an insider. You don't have to come from the prostitution world to get alongside a woman in prostitution. You don't have to be an insider, but you don't have to remain an outsider. That's what I was trying to say. But everybody can be an alongside. Yes? No matter who the stranger is in our midst. Now, it begs the question, what therefore is an alongsider? I want to put something up on here. You see, there's these spectrums. So if we put issues here, You know how you can get people who are really sad, having a blue day? Do you know what I mean? Okay? And then you can have people who are getting really depressed. So I'm being Dr. Phil right now. And you get people who are really depressed. So, and there's a spectrum here. So the stranger in your midst, there are some that are just having a blue day, and there are some who are quite depressed. Okay? And then you can get people, resources. If I put resources here, forget the handwriting. And you know, these people here are impoverished. They come from backgrounds where they haven't been well resourced. Whereas these, for example, are resourced. They come from those kind of backgrounds. And then you can kind of get, what's another one? Background, put that here. You know, you get some people who have been objectified. They've been treated like objects. You know, where I live in New Zealand, you know, just recently a little baby was put in a washing machine. And then they turned the washing machine on. And then when that had finished, they hung the baby out on the line, clothes pegs. I mean, in the kind of neighbourhoods where I live, highest rate of domestic violence in the country, just people are treated like footballs. You just kick them around. You know, that's their background. But other people over here, they've been really well nurtured. Do you see what I'm getting at? Now, these people over here, okay, having a blue day. Actually, I've got those round the wrong way. These people here have been, no. Yeah, I've got it all round the wrong way. Let's see. Could you just look at the ceiling? Do something interesting. I was meant to put here, impoverished. And put here, objectified. And put here, nurtured. And put here, what's that, resource? Sorry about it. That's better. Now, and put there. No, that's right.
Yeah.
So, now we're rocking. These people here are kind of sad, but well-resourced and nurtured. Now, these people need a friend. Yes? Now, these people here, they actually do need professionals. They need professionals. But both need an alongside. An alongside. So what is an alongside? An alongside is not an outsider, doesn't have to be an insider. An alongside is more than a friend, but less than a professional. This is the concept. More than a friend, but less than a social worker. More than a friend, but less than a professional. Now, so first off, an alongside is more than a friend. I mean, friends are great. I wish I had more. I mean, but you know what friendship is like? Friendship is based on mutual attraction. Friendship is based on electricity. Friendship is based on chemistry. Friendship is based on likability. Friendship is based on random, serendipitous. Let's be spontaneous. Let's just see. Do you see what I mean? Friendship. Great. Love it. But an alongside it is more than a friend. An alongside it is marked by intentionality. See, genuine friends, you don't actually need that kind of intentionality because you've got a kind of a chemistry going. But an alongside is highly intentional. An alongside is not a mentor. Now, I mentor too many people. I mean, at my age and stage, 58, I mean, you know, it's my role to be a mentor. Do you know? And I am being mentored by a few people as well. Mentoring is great. Mentoring is where, you know, you have a little bit more experience, you've been around a few corners, and so you've got to pass it on. Love mentoring. But, you see, the alongsider is not a mentor. Because to be an alongsider, you're working with someone who, when they sit in their world, they sit alone. Social isolation. To be an alongsider, you're getting alongside someone in your existing world that everybody else dislikes. Are you with me? And if they sense that you're doing a mentoring number on them, you've lost them. They'll do a hasty retreat. You see, the alongsider is not like this. It's not top down. I've got a little bit more experience I can pass on to you. It's not that. The person who everybody else dislikes, any sense that you think you're better than them, you've lost them. So the alongsider, it's like this. You learn from each other. There's a mutuality here. Okay? So I'm just defining the term. It's not an outsider, not an insider, a longsider, more than a friend, not a friend, not a mentor, not a counsellor. Now, I've been to counselling, and it probably doesn't come as a surprise to you. I think counselling is great. I'm not a counsellor per se, but I end up counselling people. I think counselling is great, but when you're working with this person in one of your existing worlds, and the person is someone that everybody else dislikes, could be a work environment. When it comes to the cafeteria at lunchtime, no one wants to do lunch with them. When it comes to an extended family, they're shamed and they're shunned by the rest of the extended family. There's always one. When it comes to a neighbourhood, there's a shut-in elderly person and no one visits her. It could be Turek, could be Footscray. It could be in a law office in town. It could be, any of the existing worlds. But if you're coming alongside that person, if they get a hint that you have reduced them to, a therapeutic category. And never forget, these people have got wonderful crack detectors. These people who are socially isolated, be they rich or poor, they develop what is called a survival ethic. And in their survival ethic, they develop an intuitive muscle. And the muscle is, they can read you like a book within 20 seconds. And if they sense that you're kind of trying to be this therapist with them, this counsellor, and you're reducing them to a therapeutic category, you've lost them. Are you getting what it is? Yeah. Hold on. We'll do the Q&A soon. Do you mind? No. I just want to finish this. Yeah. Sorry about that. So not a counsellor, nor an evangelist. Now look, don't get me wrong. I love to see people come to Christ. I really do. And not only is there a party in heaven, but I'll have my own party as well. And I know how to party. I've worked it out. It's taken me decades. I just love to see people come to Jesus. But look, the people that I'm talking about, be they rich or poor, be they professional or unemployable, They've had people in their history who have done numbers on them, who have got agendas and plans for their lives. And if they sense that you also have a hidden agenda to get them saved, they will make a hasty retreat. So an alongsider has to be really clear and clean at centre. So you're there to sit in their storm. No agenda. But it's a journey of discovery. Who knows what might happen? But you don't go in with an agenda with these people. With other people, I do. I mean, I don't mind being the evangelist, and I have been and am at times. Do you know what I mean? Highly intentional. I don't mind that. But with these people who are socially isolated, I'm the alongsider. Are you getting this now? So the need not to be driven by... So if someone becomes a Christ follower, and I've seen it happen, thank you, God. It's by virtue of a consequence, not an intention. You getting this? Yeah. So the literature tells us, and I've got to wrap this up, and is it Cheryl? Yeah, I'll come back to you. The literature tells us that to be an alongsider, at minimum takes 18 months. You see, what is happening in a lot of Christian ministry and mission today, have you noticed this? That we've got a lot of people, and pastors are like this, and Christian leaders, and they bounce off a whole lot of people all over the place, like this. And at the end of the day, they feel really good. In front of their people, they look good. No, not very sure. See, whatever happened to that kind of one-on-one, skin-on-skin, face-on-face over a long period of time? See, I think we've lost it. And I think we've lost the skill sets that go with that. Especially, how do you do it over 18 months with someone that everybody else dislikes? And you know, when you start doing these relationships, you think, I can understand why everybody doesn't like them. I don't like them either. But it's being more than a friend. You see? So the literature says it's you know, I mean, but I kind of think, you know, it could be 4 months, 4 to 4 years, 40 years. You know what I mean? The point being, it's a long period of time. And there are just certain steps. And if you want to know those steps, you have to buy my book. And come to surrender. Because that's what the surrender's about. Sure. And the book is coming out later this year, early next year, so that we can have it available for surrender. Yeah. But it's called Alongsiders, sitting with those who sit alone. But the beautiful thing about this concept is, and this coming back to you, Sarah, is that, you know, people are really busy these days. And when they sense that, oh, someone like me is coming into town to talk to them, they think, oh no, I don't want to go and hear that guy. He will layer onto our lives another, you know, sphere of busyness. The beautiful thing about this alongsider concept is, you don't have to go to another world. I'm not asking you to go to the slums. I'm not asking people to you know, do you know what I mean? There is someone in one of your existing worlds that when they sit alone. True. And that's where you start. Do you like it? So there you are, friends. That's a bit of a rant and a rave. So it's an introduction, really. Yeah. Any comments, criticisms, questions? Yes, sir. I was going to come to Cheryl first, sorry, because she, yeah.
I was interested that you talked about when you're working with these people.
Yeah.
And my immediate thought was you're making it sound like a job, which I'm not sure that was your intention. No. But I'm thinking in my mind, a job is an irksome thing. I don't want another job.
Yeah.
And it would be better if it was communicated in a way that it actually becomes who you are. Do you know what I mean? I can't suggest a better way, but just...
I would say it's labour. I would say it's bloody hard work.
But so is bringing up children.
Yeah, exactly. That's labour.
But it's a labour of love. I
No,
guess
but there is labour there, isn't there?
somehow overlaid.
No, I would say, Cheryl, it is work. I mean, these are people that you can understand why everybody else doesn't like them. They're a pain in the butt.
But it's work you discover in your work,
Yes.
as opposed to another layer
Oh,
of
yes,
work.
definitely
I
that.
think that's the play there,
Yeah.
isn't it?
And initially, you know, Cheryl, I mean, it's a really good question.
It was interesting
Yeah.
because I'm sitting here thinking about people
Yeah.
in my world
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, would I think to myself, well, I'm going to work with that person? Maybe for me the word work just
Yeah, conjures up other
conjures up other
images.
things,
Yeah. But no, there is a labouring aspect. But I don't know, it's sort of like, you know, it is with some people, you go into it and you haven't got a heart for it at all. And you haven't got a heart for them. So you're having to come out of other categories. You're not coming out of joy, you're not coming out of passion, you're not coming out of inspiration. You know, with some people, you're not. You're coming out of dogged,
obedient.
dogged, you know, it's a grind. But I don't know, it's amazing that as you keep turning up, something does shift. So sometimes with some people it's like you do have this wonderful predisposition, this inner affection of the heart. But with other people, it's not that way. It's you coming out of this dogged turning up. But as you do, something shifts. So that's the best way I would put it.
You
Yeah.
alluded to it before about being less than a professional.
Yeah.
Because actually I think what you're talking about is that friendship, you don't do a lot of skill. When there's work, there's skill involved.
Yeah.
And so my experience with walking alongside people, you need to be fairly skilled.
Yeah.
And that's part of work.
Yeah.
Being a friend, you don't normally need to be skilled.
Yeah, I
Because there
agree.
are certain things that come up with someone who's difficult to you that you need to be very careful how you are alongside. Because there are all sorts of that side does need work.
Yeah.
And so it is a labour. So it's not about hard work's part of it,
Yes.
but you need to be skilled
I mean,
to work alongside that.
if I picked up on Greg, I think that's a helpful comment. I mean, for example, one of the steps of, I will come back to you soon, one of the steps of compassion I have in the book, for example, is to be at your cerebral best.
Yeah.
Because, let's be honest here, not an unkind comment, but it's a sociological observation. A lot of Christians are thick.
Yep.
They are. Look, there are people in our existing worlds who face horrendous complex issues. And we reduce such complexity to cliches. One-liners. It's horrendous. And it doesn't do justice to what this person is facing it. And they know it. So they make a hasty retreat.
It doesn't do justice to the person.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It doesn't
saying.
value the
Yeah,
person.
it doesn't value the... So, I don't know about you guys, but when I became this Christ follower, I embarked on certain practices to be at my cerebral best. And like one of them, for example, was that, and this is pre-computer of course, that if I was at the dentist waiting to be drilled, and I was in the waiting room, if I picked up a magazine and saw an article on depression, I'd rip it out. I mean, it's for the public. So I'd rip this article out and I'd get a manila folder. And I built up 600 plus folders, slightly OCD, but I built up, 600 folders. I don't know, and I still have, both on computer and hard copy. If I'm ever reading a book, I can take you to a book in my bag now that I'm reading, and I have an index at the back of the book. Do you do this? I do it my own indexing. In other words, and I started as this, dumb, might not think nothing much has changed, but this, and you'd read something on phobia, and I thought, that's brilliant. So I put fear or phobia, page 42, pre-computer. Then get these cards and put fear at the top and author's name, title of book and page number. And now I have that index on hard copy and on computer. So for example, when a woman came to me and said, Mick, I want to have a coffee with you, and I sat down with her and she says, I didn't know her, and she says, I'm Christian and I'm a lesbian. I said to her, that first coffee, I said, I'd love to hear your story. Genuinely. Absolutely. Fascinating. Who's not to want to hear it? Do you know? And so, after an hour and a half, I said, look, I've honestly got to go. And it was genuine. No technique here. I had to go. And she said, you mean you're not going to say anything to me? I've got to go. And so she, of course, wanted to do another coffee. Now, in between coffees, what am I doing? I'm going to my stuff that I've collected over decades, and then next coffee, to pick up what Greg is saying, I'm asking knowing questions around the complex issue of human sexuality. And she knows I know. And then, to just play on the story a little bit, there was one week where I had 4 people out of the gay community, quite independent of each other, asked to have a chat with me. And after a while you're thinking, what's going on here? So the third person, I said, you're the third independent person this week. And they said, haven't you heard? And I said, heard what? They said, you're the go-to guy. I said, please do explain. And there is a sense in which I think we are to be the go-to person in our existing worlds. And that is not a point of arrogance. See, Jesus was a go-to person. But it's amazing, when people know that you've got certain skill sets, like Greg is saying, you get a rep. And it's all word of mouth. And people start to say, look, you might not agree with this guy, but he's good to talk to, or she's good to talk to. That's why it's labour. That's why this. Your question or comment? Yeah.
You were talking about a few decades ago. Well,
yeah.
A few decades ago, I became an industrial chaplain.
Cool.
And the heart of that was walking the floor.
Yes.
And being with people in their workplace.
Yeah.
And you talk about football, and somebody would think you were an avid Hawthorn supporter because because they were.
Yeah.
And then after half a dozen chats with that person, the fellow says, I've got cancer. And that was the wonderful thing about chaplaincy.
Yeah.
But what I originally wanted to say, when you came up with this word alongside it, you know what word in Greek I thought of? Pardon me, I'm not trying to sound fancy. Parakletos.
Yes.
The one who's called alongside.
And in Latin you can go to amare, which means actually amateur, which means to care. So then you've got the professional, but I think actually as I interface with more and more people, I don't know, there is a disenchantment out there now sociologically towards professionals. And that's not to have a go at professionals, it's just to say that maybe we've overdosed a little bit, the overly professionalisation of, and people are actually looking for amateurs actually, because they don't have hats on. It's interesting. That's just a sociological comment. It's not a value-laden one. Anyone else? Yeah, Jay.
This is, you called me Ray before, so
Yeah,
I'm
we're going with Joe now.
Mine's Mick.
Rick.
Rick.
Dick.
I wasn't thinking that.
Anyway, go for it.
Just pedantics a little bit. Your view of what it means to be a friend, I personally think it's a little, lack of a better word, narrow. Because I actually think friends do merge into that. And but the reason I think that is because I think the person you come alongside of actually will see you as a friend. Because that is their only person in their space who has shown any interest in them. And so for you to come in and say that in your mentality to say I'm not being a friend, even though it's a bit more, they themselves probably would perceive you as a friend.
So can I comment on that?
No way. Absolutely. But just that, not a contradiction, but that sense of...
No, let me comment on that, because I'm only giving snapshots here, but if you get the book,
I don't read.
Yeah. No, the thing with the alongside, I've actually, for communication purposes, given you concepts, but actually how it plays out on the ground, you don't say to them, oh, I'm now your alongside them. Because it's an organic thing, how it plays out on the ground. There's no categories, it just evolves.
And it helps you deal with your expectations.
Yes.
So if I go into it thinking it's a friendship,
yeah, that's right.
It's a very different world.
Very different. So the way it organically evolves for me is that one of the crucial steps is promise making. Because when you make promises to someone who when they sit alone, promises are for them the food of hope. Promises speak to them that they have an alternative future, possibly. It's a bit like Naomi in the lovely little book called Ruth. Terrible time, an ethnic minority person, and she lost her husband, sons, you could go through the whole long list. And then there was someone in her existing world who spoke promises to her, and that was Ruth. And I believe that kind of promise making is the food of hope. So with the alongside relationship, one of the initial things that I do is speak promises, not a friendship. That may be a consequence, but it's not a driving intention. So some have emerged as friends, them to me, me to them. But some not. So initially it's more, hey, how about, we just kind of catch up for, a coffee once every fortnight. That's a promise. And that's how it kind of usually starts. It's kind of, but it's not like, now I'm doing promise making. It's more organic than that. But I'm for communication purposes. So no, I would put a bit of a qualifier around what you're saying, but it's great that was a great comment. This one and this one, only 3. So my contribution to this academic conversation is to say, actually there are 3 more that you guys haven't seen. There are 6, and you need all 6, and Wesley knew this. And unfortunately, they've come to agree with me. So basically it goes like this. That to nurture a culture, my friend, brilliant question, orthodoxy. In other words, the whole narrative of Scripture, the whole story, that has not been done in churches these days. It's not. And embedded in the story is promise. The promise of human maturation. It's brilliant. But it's the whole narrative. Yes?
Yep.
And that's where, N.T. Wright must be read.
That's right.
If you're asking for a modern day scholar who's really probing the whole of the story, I would say he's the lead scholar and must be read. Orthodoxy, but at the heart of it is promise. Even embedded in command is promise. It's just brilliant. And out of that story, and then that story then, when it is story, the whole of the narrative of Scripture, it affects the heart. Also cardia, heart. It affects the heart such that people in our pews, in our churches, are affected by story. And the affections of the heart, they change. And as people begin to give themselves episodically to these affections, these new affections, these affections become a predisposition, a governing inclination. Do you see what I'm getting at here? This is a bit technical. Blood sugars are down. And so then there is orthopaedia. Now, orthopaedia carries the idea of the ideal. In other words, perfection. That is not communicated today in churches. That radical progress can be made. That people can become perfect this side of the grave.
In terms of their own personal formation? What
yes.
are you talking about?
But what I'm not saying here is perfectionism. Sinless perfectionism. But Wesley meant it in the sense that one could actually make a huge amount of progress. That we can keep the bar high. And it's doable, reachable, and accessible. And then, to help that, he created all manner of groups, orthokoinonia. And you know, if you've done development theory of people, I don't know if you've done that, what Wesley did was he had a different type of group for people on where they were up to in their developmental journey. So he had different types of group along the spectrum. It's absolutely brilliant. And then people would go from this type of group to that type of group. Then they would graduate to this type of group. But he had groups for Africa. You know, he had so many groups. Just absolutely brilliant. It was a social discipleship. But in these groups, there were a lot of rules. There were rules. Nomos, rules. Orthonomos, right rules. Because he realised that it had to be not just a social discipleship, but an accountable discipleship. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. And then finally, orthopraxy. But here's the beautiful thing about Wesley and orthopraxy. See, a lot of people, what they do is that they go, oh yes, you do this, and then you have that, and then this, and then that, and then this. Oh, and now you're ready to do. You know, this is the applied side, the application. No. Wesley saw this just as formative as all the others. In other words, he came up with this brilliant thing. He said, when you visit the sick, two people are benefited, the sick person and the visitor. Because as you do, something shifts inside of you. It's like, if you're a walker towards the stranger, two people are benefited. The stranger and the walker. Yes? So what I'm trying to do, Jay, is concretise these six.
It's also the sick doing the visiting. The
yes.
Sick.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it is like that.
Yes, it is like that. That's exactly right. But to answer your question, I am trying to concretise. This is my grid. So in these last 3 years, going into the fourth, you know, this is what I have an eye for. Not just 2 out of the 6, not just 3 out of the 6. So we have some new rules, we have some new groups, the bar has gone up. Do you see what I mean? There's a heart religion. When I exhort people to go out and do, I say, guess what? It's good for you. It's life for you. You benefit as well. Yeah, so I got a bit excited there, didn't I? Yes.
It's good.
How's it going?
Hey?
How's it going?
Hard work.
labour?
You know, I mean, the repair job goes to the end of next year. I honestly did think it would take 4 years to do. And then we have to see what we can build on top of the broken wall. Now, whether my name is on that, I don't know. And I've said that to them. I said, I don't know if I've just been called in here to do a repair job, but if we were to build something on top, I have no idea what that would look like in the scaffolding. Do you know what I mean? But in terms of the impulse, definitely this. Yeah. Yeah, there you are.
Good.
Shall we leave it there? Or have you got something? No?
No.
Anybody else? Final? I've had enough.
Mick, thanks so much
Yeah.
for sharing your heart and your hands and some thinking from your head as well.
Yeah.
It's been most instructive and helpful for those of us in the room who are part of Churches of Christ, who are going through some renewal processes about how we do this stuff that we're called to do. It actually dovetails really neatly in there. So thank you from that perspective, as well as opening up the broader conversation about what we need to be doing kingdom-wise. So really appreciate, as always, the input that you give.